have learned to endure long, cold nights. You will see the frozen Moskva River stretching silently, and the dark forests beyond, where distant wolf calls echo across the snow-laden land. As we guide you through each chapter of the night, we will not rush. Instead, let your mind wander through the stillness. Let the images of timber, frost, and candlelight fill your imagination, and allow the calm of medieval Moscow to wrap around you. Before we begin, a gentle reminder to our viewers. If you find comfort in our stories, please consider subscribing to our channel for more peaceful journeys through history. Like, share, and comment. If you feel inspired, it helps us continue to bring these quiet tales to life. And after the spoken story concludes, we will leave an hour of relaxing, soothing music playing softly, perfect for drifting into sleep, studying, or simply letting your mind rest in peace. Let the music carry you gently into the calm of your own winter night. Now, settle comfortably, breathe slowly, and allow the hush of medieval Moscow to envelop you. Tonight, we step together into a still winter night in medieval Moscow. This intro is immersive, sits smooth, and aligns perfectly with your go-to-sleep historian style. If you like, I can now create a matching detailed outro, which will smoothly close the story and transition into the relaxing music. The night had settled over medieval Moscow like a great, silent cloak, heavy, unmoving, woven from snow, frost, and a quiet so deep it touched the soul itself. Above the city, the moon drifted low and pale, its light softened by a thin veil of clouds. What little glow reached the earth scattered across rooftops, ramparts, and chimneys, and to Lolov Moscow seemed dusted in a soft, silver shimmer. It was a winter stillness so complete that even time appeared reluctant to move. From a distance, Moscow stood as a cluster of shadows and faint lights, a kind of sight that would greet a weary traveler approaching along a snowbound road. Wooden homes nestled close together, their roofs steep to shed the winter drifts. Thin strands of smoke spiraled gently into the sky, rising from hearths that worked tirelessly through long, unforgiving nights. The city seemed alive with warmth on the inside, though from afar it appeared only as a sleeping creature curled beneath winter's weight. The frozen skyline possessed a stark beauty. The old wooden Kremlin, still centuries away from the stone majesty it would one day become, rose at the city's heart. Its towers simple, sturdy, and darkened by time pierced the frosty air. Snow clung to the angled edges of its roofs, settling where the wind had grown tired. The palisade around it, formed from tall, sharpened logs bound tightly together, cast long, quiet shadows. Each log, stiffened with ice, seemed to hum softly when touched by wind, producing a sound like distant strings plucked in slow, thoughtful rhythm. Beyond the Kremlin, clusters of merchant homes rested shoulder to shoulder, their timbers creaking as the cold pressed against them. Many had shutters drawn tight, their windows covered with oiled parchment that glowed faintly when firelight flickered inside. The market district lay dark, but even there, a stray lantern might burn low, a merchant keeping careful watch over valuable goods, or a restless soul tending to a stubborn winter cough. Yet, such small lights did not break the night. They only joined it, adding to the tapestry of dim warmth woven through snow and silence. The winter sky hung close, leaving only a modest stretch of stars. They glittered faintly, as if reluctant to intrude upon the quiet below. A single breeze carried tiny flakes down in a slow, drifting dance. They touched rooftops without a sound. They caught in the fur-lined hats of night watchmen. They settled on the curved wooden eaves of homes built with patient hands. Each snowflake felt gentle, tame like a whisper reminding the city to embrace stillness. In the far quarters of Moscow, the Moskva River lay frozen in a long, unbroken ribbon of white. The moonlight brushed its surface until it gleamed like polished bone. The river, resting beneath its icy shell, offered no voice, not the rush of water, not the crackle of frost, not the groan of shifting ice. It was calm, entirely subdued, as if winter itself had commanded it to sleep. Fishermen's huts stood quiet nearby, their tools stacked, their little boats pulled ashore until warmer times returned. From the edges of the forest, beyond the city, faint shadows lingered, trees standing bare and brittle, their branches reaching skyward like ancient hands frozen in supplication. The woodland offered a soft rumble now and then, a fox stirring, an owl shifting unseen, or the distant sigh of wind weaving its way through pines. Though these sounds were modest, they only served to deepen the sense of peace. Moscow, in its winter stillness, was not cut off from the world around it. Rather, it existed in harmony with the quiet expanse. Closer to the Kremlin walls, the narrow streets lay empty. Snow muffled every corner, smoothing paths, softening footprints, covering old wooden planks, and filling the small ruts made by carts earlier that day. No cries of traders, no wheels rolling, no horses clattering, just the hush of falling snow and the creak of roofs settling under its weight. Lantern posts stood motionless, their flames dulled by the thick, frost-tinted glass protecting them. The glow they cast was modest, enough for a night watchman to follow a path, but not so bright that the night lost its calm. Every sound was softened, every shape muted. Even the city's smell had changed. Gone were the sense of livestock and market goods. In their place drifted the aroma of burning pine, warm bread baking slowly in hearth ovens, and the faint temps of cold iron from tools left outdoors. It was a scent that belonged only to winter, clean, crisp, and simple. As the night deepened, the weight of snow increased. It collected upon the beams of the Kremlin towers, settling into soft, rounded mounds. It dusted the sides of homes, clinging to rough wooden walls. It drifted over fences, forming gentle curves. Sometimes a patch of snow would slip free from a slanted roof with a muffled sigh, falling into a growing pile below. Yet even this sound did not break the peace. Instead, it became part of the rhythm, a quiet reminder that the city lived beneath the frost. The skyline held stories of past sieges, of long winters endured, of families that had warmed themselves behind thick wooden walls, of craftsmen shaping tools and icons by candlelight, of hunters returning from the forests with furs to trade. Each tower, each wall, each home held memory, and winter, being a slow and patient season, allowed these memories to rest without hurry. As snow continued drifting down, Moscow seemed suspended between earth and sky, caught in a dreamlike stillness. If one stood upon a high rampart and gazed outward, the whole city would appear like a sleeping village of light and shadow, protected by winter's embrace. Nothing hurried, nothing rushed. All was balanced, calm, and enduring. It was in this deep, timeless hush that the true character of medieval Moscow revealed itself. Not in the bustle of markets or the clang of tools, but here, beneath winter's quiet hand. For the city, even in sleep, held dignity. Even in cold, it held warmth, and even in silence, it held life. This frozen skyline, draped in moonlit snow and resting beneath the vast northern sky, marked the beginning of the night's slow, gentle journey, a journey through Moskva's hut, where the old wooden fortress, the humble homes, the quiet streets, and the frozen river all waited patiently to be seen. The wooden Kremlin of medieval Moscow rose from the snowy earth like a guardian shaped by patient hands in ancient winters. Before stone, before gilded domes and mighty towers, there had been a fortress of timber, resin-scented and time-worn, built by craftsmen who knew the language of wood more intimately than their own sleep. As the night deepened, the structure stood solemn and proud, its silhouette softened by fresh snow, its timbers creaking faintly beneath the weight of frost. Approaching the Kremlin at night was like stepping onto sacred ground. The outer palisade stretched wide toll logs sharpened at the top, bound together with wooden pegs and fortified mud that had long since hardened into the seams. Each log bore marks of axe and adze, the tools of men who had labored through summers past. Snow gathered between the ridges, filling grooves and softening edges until the walls seemed made not of timber, but of pale, frozen earth. A narrow gate, framed by a simple arch of heavy beams, stood slightly ajar. A lantern hung from a post nearby, swaying gently in the cold air and casting a muted glow across the packed snow below. Its flame flickered as though whispering secrets to the night. The gate's hinges were thick iron, darkened by age and wear. When they moved, they gave a low groan, not harsh, not warning, but tired, like an old man rising from a long rest. Beside the gate stood two watchmen wrapped in heavy, fur-lined coats. Their boots were crusted with snow, their beards frosted white, and their breath drifted in soft clouds with every exhale. A small fire burned in a clay brazier between them, its flame weak but determined. Red embers glowed beneath the ash, sending up thin ribbons of heat that vanished into the frigid night. The watchman spoke little. In the dead of winter, words were saved, breath guarded. A nod, a quiet grunt, or the lift of a lantern often sufficed. Between them, a wooden staff rested against the gate decorated with carved lines marking years of service. Such carved staffs were common among the Kremlin's defenders, bearing not names but symbols. Trees for birthplaces, stars for battles survived, circles for harsh winters endured. Each mark was a memory. Each memory a quiet oath. Stepping through the gate into the Kremlin proper felt like entering the very heart of early Moscow. The air grew stiller, the snow deeper, the silence thicker. Buildings clustered together inside the enclosure, their rooftops sloping sharply to shed winter's burden. The structures were humble but sturdy, a granary with thick walls to keep harvests safe. A blacksmith's shed dark and cold until dawn, a storehouse of tools, arranged neatly beneath. Animal hides, and a small wooden chapel whose single candle glowed faintly through its oiled parchment window. The snow-covered ground bore the faint tracks of those who had passed earlier, the watchman's boots. A stray cat that had slipped beneath a fence, the imprint of a sled drawn by a weary horse at twilight. Now, in the depth of night, the tracks were softening as new snow fell in slow spirals, erasing the day's pattern and preparing the earth for morning. Near the center of the Kremlin's courtyard stood a large structure, the chief hall, built with logs thicker than a man's waist. The door was adorned with simple carvings of birds, trees, and swirling lines representing the flow of time. Such carvings were charms as much as decoration, believed to guard the hall from spirits that wandered winter nights. Snow rested gently upon them, almost glowing under the moon's pale touch. Inside the hall, a faint glow flickered beneath the door's lower edge. The chief of the guard likely remained awake, reviewing reports, checking. Walls needed monitoring for signs of frostbite or shifting supports. Winter, like any adversary, attacked slowly but relentlessly. Around the hall, smaller buildings formed a protective ring. One housed tools for repairing the palisade wooden mallets, chisels, spare logs, and tar for sealing cracks. Another served for the younger guards who took turns resting between patrols. Their snores would have mingled with the crackle of fire if the night were quiet enough, but the wind carried those sounds away. A well stood nearby, its bucket frozen. Half-raised, ice crystals formed delicate lace along the rope, each thread sparkling in the lantern glow. Water drawn from this well had quenched many warriors' thirsts, filled cooking pots in times of plenty, and provided a small luxury warm washing water when heated on the main hall's hearth. In winter, the well was both a necessity and a test of endurance, for its icy grip challenged even the strongest arms. The inner courtyard stretched wide enough for drilling troops, when weather permitted. Tonight it was empty, save for two watchmen crossing slowly from one post to another. Their footsteps crunched softly, muffled by new snow. Each carried a wooden shield slung across the back, and a spear tipped with a modest iron point. The spears were not polished. They were tools, not ornaments. Their weight, their balanced ease mattered more than appearance. Above the Kremlin's walls, wooden towers rose like silent sentinels. Their roofs were steep and narrow, allowing snow to slide down rather than settle dangerously. At the top of each tower, slatted openings offered a view of the land beyond the fortress. From such a height, the watchman could see the frozen river, the dark forest, and the scattered glimmers of homes throughout the city. Tonight, lanterns in a few distant windows still burned, but most had dimmed into a faint, comforting glow. Entering one of the towers required climbing a narrow wooden stair. Each step had been worn by countless boots, the center of each plank slightly hollowed by time. As one climbed, the sound of wind intensified. It slipped through cracks and crevices, singing a low, trembling note that mingled with the occasional creak of the tower's frame. Yet the watchmen were used to these sounds. They did not fear them. they understood them. A tower spoke its own language, telling them when the wind shifted, when ice thickened, when snow piled too heavily on the rafters. At the top, the view was breathtaking. The city stretched quietly beneath the moon. Every roof wore a blanket of white. Every street was smoothed into pale pathways. The wooden skyline curved gently toward the river, and the forest beyond stood like a slumbering giant beneath the snow. Smoke drifted in thin lines across the sky, each one a mark of life, warmth, and family. In these plays, the wooden Kremlin was more than a fortress. It was a heart beating slowly in winter's calm, protecting the people who dreamed softly in the homes beyond its walls. Its timbers whispered with history, its fires glowed with duty, and its guardians, patient and unwavering, stood as the silent keepers of Moscow's peaceful night. The walls of the wooden Kremlin stretched outward like the arms of an ancient guardian, embracing the city it vowed to protect. On winter nights such as this, still, pale, and heavy with snow, the night watch moved along those ramparts with measured steps, their presence as much a part of the fortress as the logs themselves. The watchmen were the unsleeping eyes of Moscow, keeping their silent vigil while the rest of the city curled into warmth. The ramparts were packed, snow laid over sturdy wooden planks, creating a narrow path that circled the inner fortress. Lanterns hung at long intervals, their light subdued behind frost-clouded glass. Each flame flickered with a tired glow, casting trembling halos across the white surface beneath. Shadows stretched long and thin, rising and falling as the lanterns gently swayed in the night wind. Here, the winter air pressed, sharper than in the courtyard below. Cold moved openly along the walls, drifting from the frozen river and the distant forest. It curled around the towers, slid down the crenellations, and settled along the path where guards walked their rounds. Even wrapped in furlined cloaks, the watchmen felt the bite of the night with every breath. Their eyelashes glistened with frost, their beards stiffened into icy fringes. But they walked on, unhurried, steady. At this hour, most of the watch was divided into perzan, old custom carried forward for both safety and companionship. The older guards, seasoned by years of winters, led the younger ones with quiet dignity. The younger watchmen followed with lanterns in hand, spears held upright, boots sinking slightly into the snow-packed wood. The creak of timber was a constant companion. The walls expanded and contracted in the cold, each groan sounding almost alive. A watchman could learn the mood of the fortress by its sounds. A long, slow creak meant wood adjusting to frost. A quick snap warned of tightening cold. A deep rumble announced that the weight of snow was shifting overhead. The walls spoke, and the watchmen listened. From the ramparts, Moscow appeared hushed and ethereal, its shapes softened into gentle contours, its lights dimmed, its movement nearly stilled. The homes closest to the Kremlin looked like small glowing pockets in the dark, their chimneys releasing thin ribbons of smoke that drifted sideways before rising toward the star-pale clouds. Each plume marked a family gathered close to their hearth-a-site that eased the loneliness of the watch. As the pair of guards moved along the northern stretch of the wall, the older watchman paused beside a tower. He lifted his lantern toward the forest beyond the city. The trees stood motionless, their bare arms silvered by moonlight. From within, a faint sound, soft, distant, and uncertain. Perhaps the cry of an owl or the shifting of branches under snow. The younger guard tensed slightly, instinct urging caution, but the elder only listened, then nodded. "The forest breathes," the older guard murmured. "Nothing more." The watchmen were trained to see all possibilities. Continuing their patrol, they walked past the arrow slits cut into the towers, narrow openings framed by hardened resin-coated wood. Through these slits, the guards could see far into the distance. The world looked like a painting, the frozen river gleaming faintly, the snow-covered roofs shimmering, and the dark mass of the forest pressing gently against the horizon. A pair of guards stationed in a tower greeted the patrolling watchmen with slow nods. Inside the tower, a small fire glowed in a stone-lined pit, giving off just enough heat to keep numbness from setting into fingers. Spears rested against the wall. Shields hung carefully on pegs, and a leather bag of extra oil for the lanterns sat ready. The tower smelled faintly of smoke, pine resin, and wool. The patrolling watchman paused briefly to warm their hands. Theo rubbed his palms near the faint heat and looked out through the slats toward the snowy town. He could see individual homes, the market square, and the distant wooden bridge that crossed the river. All seemed at peace. "When the city sleeps," he said quietly, "the walls must stay awake." Here, the roofs formed a gentle slope toward the river. Lanterns glowed like faint amber stars trapped beneath snow. The sound of the city's life was mute, distant dogs shifting in their sleep, a shutter tapping softly, or the low hum of a stove's draft. Winter softened everything. A gust of wind swept across the ramparts, scattering fine snow that sparkled in the lantern light. The watchmen pulled their cloaks closer. Their boots struck the wooden planks with a slow rhythm that matched the fortress's breathing. The walls seemed to move with them, settling, adjusting, creaking gently under winter's weight. As the pair reached the western tower, the moon dipped lower, casting its last clear light across the city. The elder paused one final time, leaning against the crenellate. His gaze traveled from one quiet district to another, then to the frozen plains beyond. He listened not for danger, but for the assurance that all remained calm. And indeed, everything was. The night, the walls, the city, the snow wall rested in perfect stillness. The watchmen moved on, lantern light flickering against the wooden beams. Their steady patrol was the heartbeat of the sleeping city. They kept watch not only with eyes, but with quiet devotion, guarding Moscow through the long winter hours until dawn would return to lift the frost from the rooftops. The market square of medieval Moscow, so lively by day, so loud with barter and boots, laughter and quarrels, lay now in a hush so complete it seemed almost enchanted. Snow drifted down in soft spirals, falling upon empty stalls, shuttered booths, and the wooden frames of carts left waiting for morning. A place that had pulsed with life only hours before now appeared frozen in time, resting beneath winter's quiet hand. At the square's eastern edge, the largest stalls stood in ordered rows, their roofs blanketed in thick snow. Cambasonings had been tightly rolled and tied earlier in the evening, their edges stiff with frost. The ropes that bound them creaked softly whenever the wind brushed past, small, faint sounds swallowed quickly by the winter night. Beneath those awnings, tables stood bare, save for a few forgotten baskets or the faint scent of goods long since stored away for the season. By day, merchants filled this place with noise. Fishmongers shouting prices, furters boasting of their finest pelts, farmers arguing over the weight of grain. Yet now, no voice rose from the darkness. No footsteps hurried across the planks. No horse snorted impatiently beside a cart. Instead, the market breathed a calm so deep, ancient, transformed everything. It softened the edges of the wooden